But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
This is HBR News number 188. Tumblr is an independent company and can do whatever it wants. With Mike, Hannah, and me, the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez. Hello, everybody, and welcome to HBR News number 188. Mike J is not available. He is not feeling well. So, consolations to Mike J in case something kills him. I just, I hope that doesn't happen, but you never know with the bugs that are going around these days. So today,
and the fires. It might be from the fires. Maybe he's caught the from the fires.
He's in California, so it's possible. Yeah. He could have drank the water. So yeah, on today's panel we have Hannah, Dr. Anarakam, and me. But it will still be a great show despite Mike J not being here. Or at least we're going to try to do what we can to make up for his not being here. So please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as in the comments section. On this week's HBR News Show, we're going to be talking about the changes at Tumblr, a custody battle over a 6-year-old child that may or may not be trans, men recording consent to protect themselves.
About the same story. Like Tumblr is a 6-year-old child. Perfect sense.
That's true. And more. So stick around. It should be a good time. And join us afterwards for the patron-only after show. So a website came to my attention called... All right, this is real. So, and I mean, of course it is. A website came to my attention called animefeminist.com. A website whose primary structure seems to be built around discussing anime from guess what perspective? Because that's what we needed. This is a sample. Oh, wow. We're getting some acknowledgments. Thank you. Here's a sample from their About section on the website. Anime Feminist launched on the 11th of October in 2016 with 3 goals. Number 1, become a hub for the kinds of feminist critique we, as feminist anime and manga fans, wanted to see. Number 2, create a welcoming, inclusive space from which to support and signal boost underrepresented perspectives. And number 3, pay everyone fairly for their work. So I like that last one. So let's see what other gold nuggets we can find on the website. I thought we would just look around.
I can't wait to see what they do with Nollywood, by the way. I can't wait to see when there's a wave of feminism sweeping over the Nollywood scene.
Oh yeah, I want to see the feminist review. It's a little bit easier.
It's already a little bit androgynous already.
Yeah, I want to see what they do with Who Killed Captain Alex. Maybe they can answer the question, which is a very popular Ugandan movie that was like, I think it's one of their biggest budget ones that are most famous. So yeah, I'd like to know.
Yeah, you've out-nerded everyone already.
Okay, so anyway, if you want to, seriously though, look up Who Killed Captain Alex. It's one of the funniest fucking trailers for a movie I've ever seen. It is the funniest shit. So anyway, if you'd like to participate in our...
Look up Gay Niggas in Outer Space. We reviewed it once.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I think you can watch the whole thing online, actually. If you'd like to participate in our after shows, either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, please go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. And one other thing before we get into the stories. Guys, if there are people that are watching this from either Twitch or they're watching it on Facebook, or if you're watching it on our main channel, Honey Badger Radio, why not go ahead and give a subscription to Badger live streams? That's the channel that we usually have the chat on. I mean, if you want to use Twitch or Facebook, you are welcome, and your messages will show up in our live chat because I have them all sort of stitched together. But if you want to talk to the other people, this is sort of a community thing. So if you want to be a part of the conversation, not just with us, but also with the other people in the chat, give us a sub over at Badger Live Streams. This is where the bulk of our live shows are going to be. This is where they will remain. This is where they're going to live. And this is where the conversations go. So please consider doing that. Come on over to Badger Live Streams and give us a sub, and be sure to hit the bell for notifications. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get into the stories after I look at this one super chat. French Honey Badger gives us $2 and says, "Re." I hope I pronounced that right. Sometimes I butcher
That's
words.
not the EU regulation amount of E's in a re. Re!
It's true. All right. So let's get into the stories. This one is from Mike J. Unfortunately, he is not here to read it, so I'm going to have to do it instead. Starting on December 17th, 2018, the Verizon-owned social media service known as Tumblr plans to eradicate all porn on their website. The purge of adult content should not be a major surprise, as the website has been tightening the rules on pornographic content for years now. First in mid-2013, when the website required users to be signed in to search for pornographic terms, and then again in early 2018, when it required all users to opt out of a universal safe mode in order to view pornographic content. This increasing censorship culminated with a blog post from Tumblr CEO Jeff D'Onofrio, I hope I'm saying that right, I think that's right, in which he flatly states, quote, "Posts that contain adult content will no longer be allowed on Tumblr." Why take such a drastic step, you might ask? Some speculate it's a response to the Tumblr app being removed from the Apple iOS App Store after claims that child pornography were found on the website. Whatever the case may be, Tumblr has made it clear who they want and don't want to use their service, with CEO Jeff D'Onofrio stating, quote, "Bottom line, there are no shortages of sites on the internet that feature adult content. We will leave it to them and focus our efforts on creating the most welcoming environment possible for our community." All right.
So it sounds like he just labeled child porn adult content. If that's if it's the Apple Store removing them because of the child pornography controversy, that seems to be now they're conflating child porn with adult content, or in other words, by single one hand banning it all. And painting it all with the same brush. They're normalizing child porn, basically.
If it's true, because the thing is that there are people who are speculating that the reason for it had to do with Apple taking it down, and the reason that even the reasoning behind Apple's taking Tumblr off of their iOS store, that the reasons that it was because of child pornography, those are also just claims. So we actually don't know why Apple took it down, because they didn't come forward and say it's because of these claims of child pornography. So by extension, we also don't know if that's the reason why Tumblr is removing adult content from the website. So it's hard to say, but
it could be that Tumblr is removing adult content from their website because the average mental age of the Tumblrina, the general Tumblrina, is 12. So
I was thinking that could be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to show nudes or lewds to even adults who are psychologically 12 years old.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
For anyone who was sort of on the fence when it came to Gab's controversy with Lolly, on the fence on grounds of principle rather than pragmatism, I think we're now discovering that the pragmatism wins the day. Because if they didn't shoot Gab down on some trumped up anti-Semitism charges, they'd be doing it on some trumped up Lolly charges instead. Because if they can do it to Tumblr, they can do it to Gab. So you can see exactly why they'd be so, wary of shit like Lolly at a place like Gab.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I got a super chat from French Honey Badger, and then I want to say something else that I saw. So, because I don't use Tumblr, I've never used it, and I've been actually asked to use it. But French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, "Tumblr ban is reviving news group. Tons of porn artists are moving there because of the ban." So I thank you, French Honey Badger, for that. as an artist, I was asked if I had a place where all of my art was. I used to have a website that was my own that I used Squarespace for, but I wasn't able to continue to pay for it because I just don't make enough money. So I had to take that down. I also used to have a DeviantArt, but yeah, I don't want anything to do with DeviantArt anymore. It just doesn't seem like a good place for professional work. So people were saying, why don't you just go to Tumblr? And but I never did, and even though I don't make adult content, I understand that this ban isn't only going to, or people are saying that it's not only going to affect strictly pornographic content. Like, I've seen a lot of people, and by the way, most of the people that I've seen really vocally complaining about this have been feminists. That want their, their kind of content that they deem to be, they just deem it to be romantic, and it's not explicitly sexual, but it features lesbians or, non-binary people or whatever in like cartoon characters or whatever in romantic situations or characters from TV shows or whatever. But they were basically claiming that it's going to affect, and this is what's going to happen. I predict that when this comes, it's going to be a women worsting situation. And largely because I'm guessing that the majority of people that use Tumblr are probably women. I bet it probably has a larger female audience in the same way that YouTube generally has a larger male audience. And I think we're going to hear about that.
Someone really needs to write some kind of dissertation on why that is. Or some kind of PhD on why that is. Because why the fuck is that, folks? Does anyone know?
Well, I have a suspicion. I think Tumblr... it's a place where people mostly they blog, right? And mostly they blog about themselves. Whereas
it must be about pictures, wasn't it?
It originally was. It originally was a.
But it's sort of like the new Live Journal, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of turned into like Reddit meets Twitter meets I don't know, a mosh pit. Except that if somebody's feelings get hurt, then it like everything goes nuts.
Yeah.
And I have a Tumblr account, but I don't really use it much except to auto post content from honey badgers. But occasionally I get on there and remind myself why Tumblr is cancer and I don't want to be involved in it at all. And it used to be, and it still has some great photo blogs. But it used to be a really great site for artistic expression. And now, if you express yourself in a way that hurts the feelings of the feminist mob or the social justice mob or, hell, just any old butthurt brigade for that matter, it becomes a free-for-all attack on you.
Yeah,
and they've bullied people into near suicide.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the girl who drew the Steven Universe characters with like normal body sizes or not fat enough or whatever. And also Pleb Comics who made those. I remember we did a show on the Pleb Comics thing years ago. Yeah. And I actually still talk to I think it's a girl. I still talk to her on Twitter. And it's absolutely like some mob shit that happens. There's a lot of cringy shit on Tumblr, but I think it is dominated by women because of mostly for its blog-like nature and maybe the way in which people connect by reblogging and, sort of commenting. And then there's like the social policing that happens. I think that's the reason why. And I think that YouTube is different because it's ironic because, well, I wouldn't say ironic, but in a way, because YouTube does have restrictions, even though you can, find nudity on YouTube, like things slip through the cracks. But for the most part, it's not a porno site or anything like that. But it is mostly men that use YouTube, and it could be because the content that's made on YouTube, it just happens to be stuff that men are interested in. And of course, we're not saying that there aren't men on Tumblr and women on YouTube. When we went to VidCon, it was all like 12-year-old girls like chasing around various YouTube celebrities. So there's clearly is a large audience, but maybe it's just the way, the kinds of things that are talked about on YouTube. Like you find a lot of channels that talk about guns and cars and, you know, do it yourself and ideas and lectures and conversations and video game streams. And I bet that those are like probably the kinds of things that guys like.
Well, feminists did kind of dominate for a long time, and they targeted it to do this. They dominated political discussion on Tumblr, and that's like early on, and that's sort of where that went. Like that kind of discussion is there's a lot of women on because of that, and a lot of young women, like college age, high school age, and junior high school kids. And that's, you kind of have to watch out for that in political discussion on Tumblr. I wouldn't say they necessarily dominated the artistic end, but they might have dominated the adult artistic end, because I think most men who produce that kind of art are professionals who don't share their work for free.
Right.
And a lot of women are more likely to give their work away for free because they don't have to earn a living.
Right.
And men are less likely to be in that position where they don't have to earn a living. And so they don't give a lot of their work away for free. They'll give a sampling of their work away for free with the idea of persuading you that their work is very interesting and you want to buy access to the rest of it. And, you know, you see the same thing with women who professionally produce adult content, especially if they have a smart manager or they themselves are smart managers, where they'll give away a sampling of their work for free with the idea that you will find their work interesting enough that you want to buy access to it. And yeah, so you see a lot of more amateur hobbyist production of art by women, and you're going to see a site like that dominated by them.
And since Tumblr is used to, you know, you can like communicate with people like through it. Like YouTube has a comment section, and they used to do. Remember when they used to do this, where you can make a response video and it has like a link to the original video you're responding to in the lower, in the low bar or underneath. Like they don't do that anymore, but they used to, right? But I think that because I think Tumblr, and again, I don't use it, so I'm going off of what little I know. It creates, you can create more of like a network of people that you connect to and talk to through Tumblr's sort of the way it's structured. And maybe people are more likely to create little communities. You know, we can call them echo chambers. I guess that's an appropriate thing to call it, but I think you're more likely to form these like tighter knit little communities of people who are all following each other and reblogging each other, and everything gets shared around. And YouTube is a little bit more Wild West in a way because, well, you can subscribe and comment. You're less likely to form a bubble of people that you talk to, and it can be, I think, maybe some people find that that's a little bit too, I don't know, like unsafe socially, maybe. I don't know. I'm completely speculating, but things
did seem to start changing on the internet around 2013, 2014, because Tumblr went from normie to feminist. And well, if it ever was normie, but it went so far feminist that the normies started noticing just how insane feminists get if you give them spaces like Tumblr or Huffington Post or every university in the Western world in which to grow their weird fucking style of ivy. And the thing about third wave feminists that pushed Generation X over the edge is the same thing about Tumblr feminists that pushed the YouTube generation over the edge. I'm not calling it the millennial generation in this context because I'm into it too. I'm cusp of X and millennial. YouTube is my generation, damn it.
Yeah, and no, I get that because I'm Generation X. Like I'm pretty firmly in there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, me too. But although I will say, well, I will make fun of weird porn and everything. It doesn't bother me if it doesn't involve victimizing somebody. It doesn't bother me. I don't care what somebody is into and what kind of shit they do and everything. I might, like I said, I might find it entertaining to laugh at it or puzzle over it. but or I might be grossed out by it if it's something gross. But I don't care, and it wouldn't be something like I wouldn't go around reporting stuff like that to some website. Oh, I'm very offended by this person's weirdness. Like that just is. It seems like a waste of energy to me. Like, so what if they get turned on by something bizarre and strange and different than anything that I could even imagine finding to be sexual in the first place? If they're not hurting somebody when they do it, if they're not attacking somebody with it, if they're not doing it to kids, if they're not forcing somebody into it that doesn't want to, or forcing it into a environment that doesn't want it, where people can't turn it off and look away from it, then leave them alone. That's their business. That's their problem. And if they get all caught up and wrapped up in that stuff, that's on them. That's not anybody else. But like I said, it's today's version of a sideshow in a way, because, and even if people are worried that weirdness being visible normalizes weirdness, if it's weirdness that does not cause anybody to be victimized, if it's weirdness that isn't forced on anybody or inflicted on anybody, who cares? So what if it's normalized?
Yeah. And also, there are other places you guys can go, like Remy just said. There's like that other website that's opening up now. Well, it's like growing, I guess, news group, and people are gonna, if you want porn, go to Pornhub. Maybe Pornhub will take advantage of this. I know that they've recently turned. I think that they're doing streaming now, and they're probably gonna capitalize on it and open up a Tumblr blog area where you can go sign up. So you can get your porn fix. There's lots of places for it. Don't sweat it. There's still Hentai Haven and fucking X Hamster and Sex.com and other places that I've never been to. So
we'll just get a VPN and go crazy.
There you go.
Yeah, get a VPN. Okay, but anyway, though,
this didn't just start with people getting offended over feminist weird shit, though. I will say this: feminists actually, this is feminist bullshit. Turning back on feminists. This is chickens coming home to roost. Women Action Media set this off. And they started in 2012 or 2013 attacking social media sites with the idea that if people don't like stuff they see, they should be able to report it to the administrators and get it banned. That was their goal, to force social media to censor, not just allow people the ability to block somebody and things like that, or to deal with someone who, when you block them, they create new accounts to continue to heckle you or something like that. But to actually police people's communications and thoughts. Women Action Media, and yeah, they go by Wham, Jay. So we watched them take Twitter down, essentially, from a platform of free and open communication.
Yeah,
to
the town square.
Yeah,
to what it is now.
Yeah, the Gestapo is going to come and get you if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person. So this is feminism's chickens coming home to roost. They ask for it, they deserve it.
This
but
is
the
why
rest of the internet
that's
doesn't,
why
and that's why it's bad.
They're an independent company. They can do whatever they want, and I know it hurts, but this is it's just like a lot of people who understand how free speech works always says, if you start creating conditions where saying, here we should have laws against or rules against this kind of speech, you are opening it up for them to come after you inevitably. It's going to affect you, and even so here it is, right? And I'm not for what Tumblr is doing. I personally don't care. I never used it, and I don't care how degenerate it gets on Tumblr. Provided that it is, they have reasonable limits. I wonder if even Twitter does this, because you can find some really degenerate shit on Twitter. I mean, I'm not even that degenerate, but just porny stuff. I'm friends with Mercedes Carrera, so I can't scroll through my Twitter without inevitably coming across her taking one up the butt. And so I'm like, well, what if I was a child? You know, could I like accidentally run into some porn on Twitter? So I wonder if that's not also the case with Tumblr, or is it one of those things where, you know, you give them your age or your birth date, and then they sort of like filter out, you know, what you shouldn't see based on that. And then, you know, if that is the case, then how do they filter it? Because you never know when one of your, you know, normie friends that isn't a porn star, but they're just like another person on the internet, decides to share some hentai or something. Like, you know, it's one of those things, like, how do you actually control for that? But ultimately, I am for more freedom against less. And but I think that this is, as Hannah said, the chicken's coming home to roost. I'm sure that if you want people to become free speech advocates that weren't before, take away their speech. Like, if that it shouldn't have to come down to that, but sometimes it does, or at least make them feel like that's what they're losing.
Sometimes I'm on public transport, like a bus or a tube, a subway or something. I'm looking through my Twitter, and someone like Mercedes Carrera or Anna Cherry will turn up on my feed, as they do, doing their thing as they do, and I'll be there on public transport, and maybe there'll be a little kid sat next to me, just looking over my shoulder at whatever I happen to be doing.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder how many times people get complaints along those lines. How many times do parents catch their children looking over people's shoulders at porn on public transport and shit, and why they hate, you know, they don't get enough of those comments to have addressed it sooner. And I say sooner because they're only just getting around to this shit now, having already got around to removing right-wing opinions from the internet. Because you can see, you could just about teach a bot how to recognize tits and like butts and shit in pictures on Twitter.
You know,
they've already figured out how to recognize the wrong kind of political opinions and get rid of those before they start working on getting rid of the porn-like images. You know,
you could teach a bot to recognize it. In fact, you could
can.
teach a bot to
Google
recognize
can do
specific
it.
People's. Well, Facebook can teach a bot to recognize specific people's faces and ask, you know, is this person?
One of the first videos I uploaded on YouTube was of me experimenting with a mirror effect on my camera, where I just move my hands around in front of the camera, and it looks like there's weird fleshy objects moving around in front. And that got rejected 3 times before I could finally get it onto YouTube. And this was like 12 years ago.
Jeez, that's funny.
Because it automatically picks up things that look like fleshy objects moving in a certain rhythm. They've been able to do this for a very bloody long time.
Yeah. There was something else I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. I think Twitter's on borrowed time in terms of like adult content. I think because, I just see that coming. I think it's down the pipe for Twitter. It's I think they're on borrowed time. I think all the porny stuff that's on Twitter is not going to be around for much longer. Saudi Arabia owns more stock in Twitter than Jack does. So I'm just looking at my clock, looking at the watch, and I wonder if the same wouldn't be true of Tumblr, because again, the child porn thing on the iOS, that's speculative. Like, it could be true, but we don't know for sure. So maybe the CEO doesn't actually own it.
Thing.
Yeah.
See, there's speculation, and I've seen people's blog posts on this where people who find, you know, child porn on Twitter and report it to Twitter get banned from Twitter. And like I've heard this and seen this discussed from a number of people who have said that they have either had it inflicted on them by pedo acceptance advocates, or they've run into it by chance in the wrong kind of hashtag thread, and they report it to Twitter, and then the next thing they know they're banned without explanation. Well, personally, if I run into that stuff on a website, I don't report it to the website. I report it to the FBI. If you're gonna deal with something like that, and you come across something like that, and it is very definitely a questionable or worse image, and it involves a kid, that's straight to the FBI. Don't bother with the website, because a lot of times all the website will do is delete it. And if it is something that's traceable back to the actual perpetrator, they have just protected the perpetrator. Where with a site like Twitter, if you get banned for reporting that stuff, and I can't confirm whether they do that or not, because like I said, I don't report it to the website. I report it to the law enforcement. Law enforcement's the one who's going to deal with the perpetrators. But if the website's just going to either delete it or ban you, there's no point in even talking to them. And that's pretty much the only thing that the only kind of content that I'm going to go after.
Mm-hmm.
Although I do find something interesting. I've also seen a lot of discussion about Twitter having a tolerance for anti-Semitic speech on their platform. Jew conspiracy stuff, oh, the Jews run everything, the evil Jew, the this, the that. They seem to allow that, and you can find it all over Twitter. And then you get people complaining that it's on Gab. Well, it's on Gab because people get shoved out of every other site, and Gab is a free speech platform. So you can find it on Gab and make fun of it there. And I think probably the best way to sort of kill that ridiculous conspiracy theory is to make fun of it. But in any case, yeah, it's not like Twitter doesn't have that too. It's there. It's on Facebook too, and they condone it. They seem to tolerate it.
If you want to get rid of anti-Semitism, you need to get rid of white supremacists and Muslims on the same platform, and very few platforms do that.
Yeah, and that's, I see more anti-Semitism from tolerated on Twitter from Muslims than if they think they can target someone who is a white supremacist.
Oh, you better believe it.
Then they'll take them off. Oh, yeah, you're an anti-Semite.
We have a couple of Congress people that were elected like this year that have said like, some pretty anti-Semitic shit on Twitter, and they're like, they got elected. The Young Turks were celebrating, but that's none of my business. Okay, so
they're just called the Young Turks. It's just this thing. Just shut up.
Okay. Louis Farrakhan, whatever his name is
Louis
the platform.
Farrakhan. Yep.
And now Twitter has some thing in their toss about hate speech, but they said they didn't have a rule against him calling Jews termites.
Yeah, because blacks are above Jews. They're above Jews in the stack, you see.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how that works.
Guys? What do we do?
Almost 6 gorillion. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next story because we got a few more to get through. But give us your thoughts. Is Tumblr dead? Will it ever recover? Or is this really not going to put a dent in it? And how soon will it be before feminists in journalism start writing about how this is an act of misogyny? Like the day before, already? Who knows? All right, so give us your thoughts on that after the show. So we're going to move on to the next story. This is a big one. Okay, so James, a biologically male 6-year-old, is caught in the middle of a fight between his parents. While James is with his mother, he identifies as Luna, a transgendered girl. However, whenever James is with his father, he identifies as a boy. The father was dubious about the mother's claims that James was transgendered. As a result, during his parents' divorce, James's mother accused his father of child abuse and wanted to terminate his parental rights. James's mother enrolled James in school as Luna and gives him female-only clothes. However, whenever James is not under his mother's care, he dresses in boys' clothes. His father gives James the option to dress either as a boy or a girl, and James chooses the boys' clothes. James has not shown any signs that he is not consistent, insistent, or persistent as a desire to be Luna. When James visited a therapist, he was presented 2 pieces of paper, one saying James and the other saying Luna. He was then asked to pick the name that he preferred. When he was with his mother, he chose Luna, and when he was with his father, he chose James. Okay? A family friend who is a mother to 3 boys said that whenever James plays with her sons, he chooses to identify as a boy. She provided a few examples. Quote, Friday, September 21st, we had the boys over. The boys took turns telling stories, and James made up a story about 5 little boys, himself, his brother, and my 3 sons, who were such good friends that they magically turned into pumpkins so they could stay in the pumpkin patch together forever. He didn't say kids. He specifically and happily referred to himself as a boy. Saturday, October 20th. We all went on a walk to the park. Remember, this kid is 6, so just take that. We had such fun. It had rained the night before. On the walk, James slipped and got his clothes dirty. He asked if he could borrow some of my boy's shorts and if I could wash his clothes. I said sure. He went to grab something he could wear. While I was looking, he said, guess what, Miss Sarah? You don't need to find a shirt because boys don't have to wear them if you're hot. I laughed and told him I guess that's a good thing about being a boy. He said yes it is. Saturday, November 3rd. His mother came to pick up the boys to take them to his brother's soccer game. James hugged his dad and said, love you. He refused to go to the soccer game as a girl with mom and stayed with dad. That evening, they came to our house. The gender therapist that James is seeing wants to continue him along the path to transition his gender from male to female. And also, the mother is supposed to be, she's actually threatening to take away the father's paternity rights and start giving the kid the hormone therapy. So
see, every time you said Luna there, I was reminded of a man. A lot of you may remember a man named Frank Zappa. It was a bit weird. He had some children. He named his girl Moon Unit, and he named his boy Dweezil. And there was a couple of others. And Luna sounds a lot like Moon Unit. You see, that's why it reminded me of that. But Moon Unit Zappa and Dweezil Zappa are surprisingly well-rounded individuals. They're not nutters. Because they didn't look around them and go, oh, I feel like I'm the wrong thing. Even though Frank pointed at them and went and said, you're right, you're a Moon Unit and you're a Dweezil. They kind of went, okay, that's nice. I'll look around the world I'm in and figure out what I am. And it turns out the girl thought she was a girl, the boy thought he was a boy, and it all turned out fine.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah. You know, this dad ought to submit as evidence in his case the details of the David Reimer case. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right or not. It might be Reimer.
Yeah, David Reimer.
It's Reimer. But he's the one who, after a botched circumcision, this doctor John Money, who's had this theory that he believed, gender is entirely a social construct. It's all nurture, no nature, and you can just change the genitals and raise the person as the opposite sex, and they'll be fine. He was raised as a girl. And he realized between the ages of 9 and 11 years old, he sort of started to realize he's not a girl, and he transitioned to living as a male at 15. He committed suicide after years of severe depression and a significant amount of instability in his life. And it really does trace back to them screwing with his head and messing with his body and trying to change him from who he was to who they wanted him to be, just to fix this doctor's mistake. And I don't see any difference here, just because when people do experience it, gender dysphoria is a valid mental health condition, and transitioning can be a valid treatment for it. If an individual works with their doctor and finds that there isn't any other therapy that's going to help them, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that an adult can have that need. But just because that's the case doesn't mean anytime somebody is in any way, shape, or form slightly gender nonconforming, or the mom wants to feel special, that you can just flip genders on a person like that and not hurt them. And this situation could very well lead. I've I've given just the basics of the Reamer case. There was some really, really bizarre, shady shit that doctor did. Just like it was unbelievable. But the fact is, you cannot take somebody who is psychologically cis and force them to be trans without doing the same thing to that person that you would be doing to somebody who has gender dysphoria or somebody who is gay if you forced them to go to conversion therapy against their will. It's conversion therapy in the reverse. And it's just as wrong, it's just as harmful, it's just as damaging, it's just as abusive. And this mother should lose custody, really.
Yeah.
She really needs therapy herself. And she needs to walk away from the kid, let the father raise the kid, and get her shit together before she inflicts any more of her psychological problems on this poor kid.
Absolutely. And and you know what? There is a chance this guy might actually lose custody of his kid because she's threatening to take them, like lose all custody. Like right now, he's already on visitation, but he may lose more because she believes that this child should be transitioning. And there was another thing. It's not a big story, but it was something else on the side. This also is happening with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's biological child. So you know that they've adopted lots of kids from all over the world, right? And then they decided to actually have kids, and their first biological child is a boy. He's 9 years old, and he is he's actually starting his hormone replacement therapy. So he's actually transitioning. And, I don't want to talk too much about the Brad Pitt thing, but you have to wonder, none of their other kids, their adopted kids, are doing it, but their biological one is. Just makes me wonder, 9 years old, yes. Irreverse, this is bad. Like, if this 6-year-old goes on hormone therapy, that is just...
It's going to mess him up for life.
It's going to mess him up for life. I mean, he's already probably pretty messed up. If his mom's so making him wear clothes that he doesn't want to, and call himself something he doesn't want to, and he feels the pressure to do it because he wants to please his mother, or he's afraid of some kind of retribution or punishment, that's already messing him up. But if she actually puts him on pills, not good. Okay, Mike, I'm sorry.
It's pretty ironic that it was half a century ago when we started to develop the genetic ability to determine genes to especially in the beginning of the later century. We've really started to perfect the ability to turn sort of genes on and off. But fuck, how does that? What were we talking about just now?
I was talking about Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's adopted kids, and
yeah, and even back then we said, there's ethical reasons not to do this. Like we don't know where it could go, but like it cut to half a century later, and we've got around the problem. We're not doing it through genes. We're doing it through, unless you can call it epigenetics. Mm-hmm. We're sort of doing it cosmetically instead. If you see what I mean.
And I mean, I don't want to go into conspiracy theory territory here, but why is it whenever I hear about these stories of children being sort of encouraged, coached, or otherwise pushed towards transitioning, they're always boys that are transitioning to girls? I've never seen a story of a girl being transitioned to a boy. I'm not saying that's underage child. It's always the other way. They're turning young boys into drag queens, or they're turning young boys into they're transitioning them before that they're old enough to give consent. And I think statistically, although I was talking to Theron and Blair White about this when I went to MythCon, so maybe we don't have all the data, but currently, statistically speaking, the majority of people who transition are men. But there is some... It's possible that there are more women doing it, but because women tend to pass better when they do it, because they do, and they if you pass better, then you're less likely to talk about it. You're just going to do it. Maybe there are more women than we think there are. But going back to, go ahead.
That doesn't mean we want examples of the opposite.
No,
doesn't mean you need to prove us wrong. It doesn't mean the Family Project needs to start a shelter for for girls who want to become boys just to prove MRA's wrong. We don't want you to stop doing that.
No, but I wonder why it seems to me, and again, I don't have any data, I'm just going off of what I've seen, so, you know, there's no need to necessarily go down this rabbit hole because there's no, I don't have enough to go on, but it seems to me that there are a lot of boys that are being turned into girls, not just being like educated like girls in our education system and like sort of, you know, building this, it's almost like feminizing everything about boys, but also just like literally turning them into girls. And I'm just...
We just get to call it a coincidence that it's...
Yeah. That's all I can say.
Toxic masculinity.
I don't... Yeah.
There's another thing that's... gals have a larger scope of behaviors we can engage in and still be considered feminine. Whereas guys have a very narrow range of behaviors that like when feminists started trying to change the toxic masculinity narrative and started calling it restrictive masculinity or something like that. That was actually a very strategic move because masculinity, at least the social attitudes towards masculinity, that is restrictive. It's quite restrictive. Look at the differences in the style of dress. Women have a broad variety, pun intended, of clothing that we can wear. Like, and we are allowed to show and a huge amount more skin than men are in professional settings and in various other settings, and men's clothing choices are so restrictive in terms of what they can, but it's our posture can be different. Our like, you don't see a lot of men out there posting pictures on profile pictures and selfies on social media with their chest sticking unnaturally far forward to emphasize, they try to look as relaxed and nonchalant as possible, right? And that's it. They're not, maybe they might flex, but then people will razz them for flexing. Nobody razzes women for arching their backs and sticking their butts
or just
out.
Wearing
the only
heels.
thing you make fun of for is duck lips.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, we have been criticizing thoughts lately since they've been on the internet, and you know what? People like freak out over that, especially the thoughts themselves. They're they're the ones that get the most offended.
But if men dressed anything like that, then they became that kind of reputation too. But they don't dress like that. They're not allowed to dress like that anymore.
And imagine, if they dress like that, people assume they're gay. But imagine if
or just weird. I mean, 40 years ago, it was quite normal. Sports shorts, for instance. Soccer players and tennis players wore very male ones. Quite short shorts. And it was quite normal for men to wander around outside wearing shorts that short, and nobody would bat an eyelid. It's like, it's just shorts that short. And the same goes, by the way, as I only recently noticed, for facial hair, because only a couple of days ago I shaved my thing into a lemmy, as some of you may have seen, and I stood there looking at it in the mirror, thinking, "Wow, this is glorious." But there's no fucking way I'm going outside the house wearing this. I'm not going down the store to get some cigs with this on my face. Because I'll attract attention.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? Again, 40 years ago, a lemmy would not attract attention. It's like, it's face gear. That's what men can get away with. There's loads of things men can wear on their face and look perfectly normal. But nowadays, no. You can't wear a lemmy and look normal. You've either got to be clean shaven or have the full hipster lumberjack beard. Or if you're ethnic, you can shave it into the lines.
The goatee.
Well, and the other thing is, the thing you said about attracting attention, okay? Men go out of their way to not attract attention. And that they're expected to not. And when a man attracts attention, it's usually a bad thing. Right? It's usually, or he's treated as though it's a bad thing. When a woman attracts attention, it's intentional and the norm, and she can get away with lying about, I wasn't doing that to for your benefit. I wasn't doing that to attract your attention. And can you imagine if you had, went outside with a peacock feather attached to your head, something bright and colorful sticking up for everybody to see, but then every time anybody looked at it, you would stop looking at my feather. I didn't wear this feather for you to look at. I wore this
Mhm.
feather because I wanted to look nice. But women will do that with their makeup, and
Sure.
it looks like they used peacock feathers to paint their face, and then they will turn around and stop looking at my face.
Mhm.
Stop talking about the way my face looks. I didn't do this for your benefit. I did it for me. I did it so I would look nice. Oh yeah, for who? Because
Yeah.
who you
Well,
don't see your face all day.
try
I
wearing
don't look at my face
chaps or
all
like
day.
a clown nose or like a cod piece made out of metal with spikes in the
Yeah.
front. You know, all kinds of like fashion things. I mean, there are people who do it for attention, but they tend to be outliers, like punks and stuff and goths. I have a super chat from Albert Nada I want to read before I forget. He gives us $5 Canadian and says, if you want to know who controls you, look at who you're not allowed to criticize. All right,
Yeah,
thank you, Albert.
that's true. Well, and then see, that's the other thing. And I, as supportive as I am of the trans community in terms of, nobody has the right to tell you you're not human because you're trans. Nobody has the right to invalidate you as a person because you're trans. Just because you're trans would be a really dumb reason for anybody to do that. Okay, but it is not helpful to the trans community when people who are transgender try to validate transtrenders and parents who force this shit on their kids. And that doesn't, it not only doesn't help the community, it actually is damaging to your credibility as a community because it makes it look like you are as invalid in your experiences as that situation is, rather than making that situation look more valid. The thing that that gives me hope is like the older school, like the Gen Xers and before, of people who have transitioned, and people who have experienced and dealt with gender dysphoria that maybe haven't necessarily transitioned. You know, they kind of reject this stuff, and there's a rift in the trans community over stuff like this. That in order to be valid and legitimate, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to accept liars and parents abusing their children as part of their community.
Yeah.
Which that's the hope I have for kids having this stuff forced on them, that would stop, because I honestly I really don't want the sleepaway camp movies from the 80s to come true. If anybody
Well,
remembers those movies.
actually,
Oh,
you
fuck, don't tell me they already have.
no, I'm gonna say this, and then we're gonna move on. Well, first off, there's a big difference between a trans person and a trans activist. So just
Yeah,
know that,
there's a big
and
difference.
there's a lot of trans activists that aren't actually trans. So it's sort of like, when you have like, men speaking for women in feminism, or white people like defending people of color or whatever. So there is that for one. Secondly, there was an incident, I think it was in Australia, where a woman, remember, it was just like a videotape that was going around where there was a man in a like a convenience store or like a gas station, like where you go inside, you can like buy snacks or whatever. And he was in line,
Yeah.
and there was a woman that walked in with an axe, like a fire axe, and she did a lap around the store, talked to the man who was in line, and there was a woman with dreadlocks in front of him that was paying for her stuff. I don't know what happened, like what the conversation was, because nobody heard the audio. And then she full on hits the guy in the face with her axe, and then attacks the woman with the dreadlocks with an axe, and then walks out. Almost a sleepaway camp type situation. And it came out later that was a trans woman. That actually, I found that out like the other day. I didn't know it was a trans woman. I just thought it was some woman that just went crazy, or that she knew the guy and he was like an ex or something. But what it turned out was that she attacked him because she had been getting rejected by men for a while, and then she talked to that guy. I guess she tried to flirt with him because she was sort of behaving in a flirty way, and he must have turned her down, and then she hit him in the face with an axe. So
You walk up to
yeah.
somebody with an axe and expect to be
I would have given her a phone
trusted.
number, like some phone number. A woman with an axe.
Are those
yeah.
blowjobs worth it, gentlemen? They say you'll never get blown like you'll get blown like a trap, but is it worth it?
Exactly.
Well, and this is something else. And I've noticed this with TERFs will take any example of like a crime committed by a trans woman, and well, this is what trans women do, right? That's their, because they have to be, their population has to be uniquely devoid of any criminal representation, or they're automatically criminals. But you never know this person's backstory. Gender dysphoria might not have been their only mental health problem, and that's a possibility.
Oh,
and
yeah, for sure.
Also,
I mean, that the gender dysphoria could be this could be a side effect. They may not even have gender dysphoria. They could have had like some other issue and thought that was the solution.
Right, or been talked into it by somebody who like saw dollar signs.
I saw a headline in some online news thing or something or other. I saw it through a tweet, so I hope it's not true, but I think it probably is. There was a headline along the lines of men are pretending to be women to get cushier prison sentences, and women are suffering from this, and women are paying the price, and something like that.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised.
Like I say, I would not be surprised, but I hope it's not true. The answer to that would be don't give women cushier prison sentences, and none of this shit would happen.
Yeah.
Yes, I heard about
around
that
to women being the victims. It's genius how they do that.
Oh yeah, women are the victims of women being treated more leniently in the prison system. Of course, obviously. Feminists have demanded in the UK that women's prisons be closed and more therapeutic rehabilitative methods be used with female criminals. And I'm not necessarily opposed to that. What I'm opposed to is making it unique to women. If that works, if that can help not waste lives so that, people become contributing members of society, well, society needs that. Even if we didn't give a shit about the criminals themselves, which they're people, so you should. But even if we didn't, someone being a net taxpayer instead of being a net drain on the system because they can't get a job because of their criminal history, or because they go to jail and they get trained to be even more criminal than they were before. Somebody being a net taxpayer and a worker in society, a net contributor to society, is a better outcome for society. So if that works, let's use it. But let's use it for both sexes. And limiting it to women is stupid because most people in the criminal justice system are men. Men get in trouble more often. They're more likely to get in trouble for the same things. They're more likely to get the book thrown at them when they do get in trouble for the same things. And since they are risk takers, they're more likely to get caught in the first place if they do the same things. So, if we're going to start redeeming people, let's redeem the ones that are the hardest hit by this. Women most affected, my ass.
Women get let off on hormone excuses all the time.
Oh my god!
Like why don't boys get?
Oh,
let
you
off?
poor thing! You murdered your children.
Risk taking
sad.
comes from testosterone, so that is a hormonal reason for boys, getting involved in more crimes than girls. But no, it ain't no excuse, and arguably it isn't, I suppose.
Yeah, well, no, it's just dysfunctional behavioral patterns come from learning to engage in dysfunctional behavioral patterns. And, to take it back to the news story, I mentioned the sleepaway camp thing. When you put somebody through something like this, they become destructive. When you put somebody through, you have to be fake. You have to be something other than what you are in order to satisfy me. Coming from their mother, you create a destructive person. They are either going to be self-destructive or they are going to be a threat to everyone around them. And so this situation, this is really bad. And if the court imposes this on this kid and takes the father out of the kid's life, I do predict that we're going to see something horrible in this kid's life in the future.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right, so I got a super chat, and then we'll move on to the next story. Miles Kinslow gives us $10 and says, I must say, I really live the live stream. I think he means love. I'm going to assume that you said that. I must say, I really love the live stream setup. Reminds me of an old 90s to 2000 show on Adult Swim called Space Ghost Coast to Coast. That is too flattering. Too flattering.
I'm gonna go watch me some Space Ghosts.
But if I could like achieve that goal and make the show like that, I would fucking love to.
Does anyone remember a movie review website called Spill.com?
No.
And it was great. They were around for a few years. They just had animated characters, and every time they did like a movie review, they'd do fully animated characters. A bit more than ours. They didn't just stand there.
It's like
mouths and limbs moved.
Like Cheshire Cat Studios, they do that too.
Yeah, and like in Alison's latest deprogramming women video, like all the characters are animated like that. There's software that can do that, like at a snap of the fingers.
There is. I've actually asked about it because I've seen this guy. You know, I used to talk to Rags. I haven't talked to Rags in a long time, but he was on another, and I really got to move on after this because we're already like past 6 o'clock. But he interviewed Rags, and he was he was a furry. I'm pretty sure his name was Jason Effects, and except that he's like a lizard, so I guess that's a scaly. I don't know how it works, but he must have been using some kind of software to animate so that when they spoke, the characters would animate. And it wasn't live, but for him to have done that without a ton of work afterwards would be, incredible, because it was like out really fast. So he was using some kind of software, I know, and I'd love it because I'd like to animate the characters. We've tried a couple things, and it's just a lot of work, but I think if we can like nail something down, that'd be cool. All right.
I'm incredibly lucky that they developed like automatic lip syncing by the time I was old enough to learn how to animate. But by the time you buggers are old enough to learn how to animate, they'll figure out how to auto sync entire bodies of characters.
Yes.
Right, carry on.
Oh no, it's okay. They've already done that. Have you guys seen Kazuna Ai, the artificial intelligence waifu character? She's
getting scary, isn't it?
It is.
You barely have to plug anything into it except your own voice, and it'll figure it out.
Okay, so new story. In an apparently worrying trend, men are recording pre-sex consent videos. At least it's worrying to the Sun. They use the adjective 3 times in the article. And they say, it's a short article, but they use the 3 times in the short article. And then they say this, quote, "Some men are so confused on the topic of consent, they are filming their partners giving permission before engaging in the sexual act." In the article, a woman tells a story of going back to a minor celebrity's hotel room after a night of flirting. When they arrived, quote, "he explained that his contract was very strict and that she would need to record a video of herself giving consent," end quote. The star asked her to state her full name, that she was there voluntarily, and that she consented to having sex with him. Before I finish, just good job. Definitely do that. Definitely do that. Katie Thorne.
We need to stand around in like a photogenic setting with a glass of whiskey and clap slower.
Yeah, yes, the golf clap maybe. This one. I love that meme. Katie Thorne QC, which is for those of you who may not know, Queen's Counsel, pretty sure, weighed in, quote, "The use of video or audio recorded consent is a very unromantic way to ask and might not be the cast iron protection the minor celebrity seeks. In fact, texts and social media messages before and after the encounter might be as compelling."
Unless you're in Canada, where they are outlawing the use of them in court. Of course, this wouldn't be usable either because it's prior sexual history. So what good is it? Yeah, giving consent isn't. Getting consent and being able to prove consent isn't cast iron. Why? Because women are allowed to claim that they lied when they gave you their consent, and be taken seriously in court, and have it taken seriously as a piece of evidence against you in court. That is why.
Is that something that's worked in statutory cases for a long time, and now they just extended it to all women?
Yeah. It's worked enough that when a woman says, "Well, I didn't actually consent. I was," because we've got a change of standard here in the U.S. That I don't think people paid attention to up until 2012, when the definition of sex or definition of rape changed, and with the FBI from just being against a woman to this long litany of specific acts, and all of them required penetration. There was another part of the phrasing that was very important that got overlooked when everybody was arguing over what should or shouldn't be. And that is, it went from against the victim's will to without the victim's consent. And what that last bit does is it starts mixing criminal law with contract law. And that has messed up the entire system regarding the legal response to sexual violence. Violence by nature,
without consent doesn't make sense.
Well, that's just it. Violence by nature is an attempt to contravene the target's will in some way or another, right? You punch someone in the face and you are engaging in violence, you are contravening their interest in not being punched in the face. You're not just doing it without their consent. You're attacking them. When you steal from somebody, you are contravening their will, their refusal to give you whatever it is you're taking. And when you commit rape, you are contravening the victim's refusal or rejection of your sexual advances. When they flipped that switch from against the victim's will to without the victim's consent, they flipped it from mens rea, I believe is, or mens rea, however it's pronounced. You have intent to contravene the victim's will, to you can now accidentally rape someone if you don't push all the right buttons and get all your ducks in a row. And even if you do push all the right buttons and get all your ducks in a row, this person that you are now having sex with can later come back and say, well, I didn't mean it. My consent wasn't valid because I felt pressured, or I had a beer, or I had a drug in my system that I didn't tell you about that overtly didn't show any symptoms, but mentally I was just so fucked up I couldn't consent.
So never mind recording the event, even if you could read her mind at the time, it still wouldn't get you off.
Right. The thing that has to change, we have to go back to legislators. We have to have legal reform on this. There is no other way to fix this. The law needs to be reformed back to a standard. I believe it is mens rea. Intent has to be essential to the crime. That if the intent is not there, then it is not that crime.
Mm-hmm. And people are whining about this. Lots of, not just this district attorney, but lots of women are annoyed that men are doing this. This is the situation that was created by people who are advocating for you. So this is where we are. And for guys, this is actually not a guarantee, because remember, you can't just get consent before. You have to make sure that it's ongoing and that it is enthusiastic. So, at least in California, but remember, a woman can revoke consent at any time. So you're going to have to consistently, sort of stop to, I guess, record another consent video. You know what it reminds me of? This is something that I was just thinking about. Owen Benjamin says that good comedy predicts the future. And I am reminded of the sketch that Dave Chappelle did on his show. Have you guys ever seen the Chappelle Show when it was on, like back in the early 2000s, maybe? He had this sketch called I think it was called the Marriage Contract or the Sex Contract. And it was basically like the Consent Contract, I think is what it was called. Yeah. And it was basically this funny thing that showed, you had to like fill out, like all these things that said, well, I'm allowed to, I'm asking you to sign here for oral, sign here for anal, sign here for this, and they had to sign it, and they made this big funny thing out of it. And that is good comedy because here we fucking are, right? So
Yeah, and feminists are trying to figure out how to even invalidate something like that.
yeah, well, they actually want that thing. But the thing is, if men started actually doing that, they start creating the consent contract and making it a real thing, feminists would complain that they shouldn't. They would basically say they shouldn't have to do it, of course. And they would say, well, if a man says, then what am I supposed to do to protect myself against, accusations? And they would say, well, don't rape. Like it's like it's this really simple thing. Of course, you don't have to do that anymore. You can just, people are getting accused that didn't do shit. So this is the times we live in.
As a man, if you intend to be successful, let alone a successful celebrity, to protect yourself against Me Too, you have to record and film all of your activities and sexual activities, including their consent. But as a man, if you intend to be successful, let alone a successful celebrity, and you have a sex tape of yourself and someone else, regardless of how consensual it was, it means your career is over, and the woman in that sex tape, her career is just starting.
All I can think of is it goes back to, and this is something I've done before. I've referenced this before regarding this very same thing. This poor innocent Mr. Creosote, through no fault of his own, no actions of his own, found himself victimized, his internal organs blown all over the room by his overstuffed stomach. If only that last wafer-thin mint hadn't somehow, inexplicably found its way down his throat. That evil waiter. Not that we're blaming the waiter, right?
It was the dirty Frenchman and his elderberry smell.
Just because, we're saying the waiter that gave it to him without his consent doesn't mean we're saying the waiter force-fed him, right?
Right.
But yeah, poor Mr. Creosote, such a victim.
So, okay, so when
they first wrote that sketch, like when Terry Jones and Michael Palin first wrote that and presented it to the rest of them, they were like, dude, that's the worst sketch anyone's ever written. Why the fuck would that be funny? That's ridiculous. Obviously, like 3 seasons and 3 movies later, they finally went, actually, I think we can do this. And now here we are, like bringing it up in an almost academic context.
So we got some super chats, and then I'll move on to the next story. Lord of Swarm gives us $5 and says, "Oh my God, does Dr. Random McCam watch Terrence Pop?"
Yeah, been watching the Pop since the back in the day, bro.
Yeah. Oh my God, you. Rowland. I'm not AJM Rowland maybe gives us $5 Canadian and says, "Parents forcing kids to be something they're not. Did they ever see Aladdin?" Okay. No. It's probably not okay to watch Aladdin now. It's problematic. Tyler Preston gives us $5 and says, "The fact that they're using men's fear against them as a sign guilt is despicable. And they're saying that having a recording can be used to rape women." Yeah, because and that's another thing too, is if you're like, if you do a recording of a woman, could the fact that you actually have a recording be used against you as outside of the sexual context? It could be its own thing. Unless, if you and your lady friend are into that, no shame. So just give us your thoughts on this story in the comment section below. Meanwhile, we're going to move on to the next story.
Well, countdown to when women who have been recorded giving their consent start saying, "You forced me to make this recording, and I was so scared. You can't tell in the video because I was acting, but I was so scared." And that's going to be their answer.
Oh yeah, they felt pressured because they were on tape.
And the footage people get of her saying that will be airtight in court. That's the final word. No matter what she says from now on, she's obviously being coerced.
Of course. Women have no agency. All right, so the National Institute of Health is preparing for a clinical trial that will test an experimental new form of birth control for men. This new form of contraceptive comes in the form of a topical gel that is applied to the back and shoulders. The gel works by blocking testosterone produced by the testes, or testy, then increasing the supply of testosterone throughout the rest of the body. Quote, you are cutting it off at the source, but replacing it everywhere else at a level that keeps everything else functioning normally. Says
I
Diana.
wish you could see my face right now. I think I look like Robert De Niro.
Says Diana Blythe, chief of the Contraceptive Development Program at the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. The first trial would include 420 couples, and if proven successful, larger trials will be held in the future before the product is approved.
The back and shoulders.
Yeah.
Like of the skeleton, not the back and shoulders of the vas deferens.
No, it's the back and shoulders of the man, of the human, of the top back and shoulders.
Did citation needed?
Also, yes, it blocks testosterone, but it doesn't. The way that it's phrased is, it blocks testosterone at the source, but it replaces it everywhere else at levels that keep everything else functioning normally.
Well, sure. Well, the point of contraceptive is not to block testosterone; it's to block sperm, surely.
Well, apparently that's the domino effect is that preventing testosterone from affecting sperm production reduces sperm production or eliminates sperm production. It'll be interesting to see how this pans out. The one thing I would be worried about is that when you mess with your hormones, like women's birth control has demonstrated this. When you mess with your hormones, it changes your rate of cancer development and stuff. But this may not happen with this particular drug, and if it does, it may not be the big scary thing that it was for women 40 years ago, because cancer treatment and other like means of prevention have improved to the degree that maybe this will be safer in the 21st century than the pill was in the 20th century. The pill is safer in the 21st century than it was in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
So we're basically learning to screw with nature a little bit better now, and it's getting better every day. We're not gods yet, but but our scientists and our medical professionals are definitely getting better at screwing around with nature. But it would definitely be something that, just like with the pill, there's good reason to maintain good communication with your doctor while you're using this, if this is something that you end up having access to and use. This and Vassal Gel are both promising, and I hope they both happen. That would make a huge difference in men having control over their reproduction, would make a huge difference in women's ability to use their reproductive capacity as a form of power over men. It would basically take it away. And when that happens, the hue and cry that will come out of feminists will be unprecedented. When they realize they can't drag men for child support, they will lose their shit.
Yeah. Well, men definitely need a form of birth control, like a one that has like a very, very high success rate.
Yeah.
They definitely need that, and something that works outside of condoms, because if women want to if women want to, they can get around the condom thing. But
well, and
I wonder about this though, because if this blocks your testosterone levels, won't it affect your libido? If it affects your libido, doesn't that just mean you're not going to want to have sex? Is that birth control?
They're going to find that out, I guess, in the testing, and they're going to find if that's the case. I'm glad to see it tested. If nothing else, between this and Vassal Gel, there's a potential for something to come through.
Yeah,
and I
honestly seems to address the problem of sperm rather than the problem of testosterone. Because testosterone is not the problem.
And actually, Vassal Gel has a better way of dealing with it, because it's a substance that just gets injected. it blocks sperm from coming through, but doesn't block the fluids from coming through. It basically shreds them, and
So they don't go
and
back
so
into your body and fuck you up.
well,
Give
you
weird sort of
reabsorbing.
immunized. Well, yeah.
Yeah, you still are going to reabsorb some stuff, but it's not going to be the same as if you had something that was like holding it all in.
And
But
if it
yeah,
turns out I was wrong to be skeptical, and you can just get a gel that you apply to the back and shoulders that prevents you from impregnating someone, then I will throw my hands up and go, by golly, this is a scientific miracle. Why is it taking us so long to come up with this?
yeah, yeah. And to me, I think that either one of these, they deserve support, even if this contraceptive gel, if all through all the testing and all the experimentation, they find, well, this isn't going to work. That's important information too. And so it's valuable to see the testing all the way through, to see the experimentation all the way through, and get to the conclusions that can be drawn from it. But I do hope that it turns out that this offers an avenue of birth control for men that will put the control in their hands, because women clearly aren't taking responsibility for it. I mean, we're to the point now where like half the kids born in the United States, just about half the kids, maybe more, are born out of wedlock, and more kids are born out of wedlock to mothers who make the choice on purpose to get pregnant out of wedlock than single motherhood happens without that being the mother's goal. Like it's always the mother's choice, but it isn't necessarily always the mother's goal. So it's obviously women aren't taking responsibility. Men need a way to do that besides just saying no, because you're in a position now. It's rape if you say yes, and it's abuse if you say no. So at this point, being able to say, well, all right, but I'm not going to become a father, needs to be an option.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, it's a little too early to tell. They haven't even started testing yet. And also, we have to consider what the potential long-term effects could be. We have to wait and see. So we'll follow this as like things go forward. Hopefully, I'll try to stay on top of it and see what new developments come out of this crazy gel that you rub on your shoulders. It could be snake oil, too. Who knows? So let us move on to the last story. And this comes from The Blast. Now, I just want to say before we go into it, I looked for other sites to try to find something more mainstream talking about it, and most of these were sites that essentially followed pop culture, specifically music, and they weren't like Rolling Stone or anything like that. So I don't know if that's because these guys are lying, but it was on multiple sites, or if it's because the Rolling Stone didn't think this was worth reporting on. So, Rage Against the Husband. Rage Against the Machine's Tim Comerford is claiming his wife assaulted him. According to TheBlast.com, his wife Elise is accused of seeking him out at a house that he was crashing at, gaining access to a Porsche parked in front and ramming the garage door in order to gain access to the residence. Once inside, she viciously assaulted Mr. Comerford with her iPhone and her fists, causing severe injuries to his face and body. So this woman attacked with a car, and then her phone must have been the iPhone like 10 or whatever they're on must be pretty fucking durable. Okay, from The Blast. Elise then began to attack the person who owned the residence, but she fled the scene when police arrived. Comerford says the police response was delayed due to the California wildfires, but claims Elise was later arrested at her home. The request for a restraining order was granted, and Elise must 100 yards away from Tim and any venue where his band is booked to play or rehearse. So she's basically like, there's a restraining order. So she must stay 100 yards away from Tim and any venue that his band is booked to play. She's also ordered not to disparage him in front of the children and not interfere with visitations to the children. They're due in court next month. Now, the divorce part is real. It's the divorce is everywhere. Let's put it that way. This attack is only been reported on a few websites, but it was a few. This comes after Elise split from the rocker earlier in the same week and had filed to divorce him. She requested sole custody of the couple's 2 sons, Xavier and Quentin. So,
and then this kind of violent behavior is sometimes women's response when their soon-to-be ex-husbands file for, protection of their property, or they file for equal custody rights or any custody rights when the mother has filed for sole custody. When they don't cooperate with, I'm going to leave and I'm going to take the kids and I'm going to take all your money and I want the house and the car and I want you to continue paying the bills. And when a guy doesn't cooperate with that, an entitled woman, here and there, an entitled woman just goes completely batshit crazy and does something like this. More often, I see women going the other way and accusing the man of doing things like this in order to use the resulting restraining order to force him to cooperate. And so both things happen, but this could be these stories could be completely true. I don't know that website, so I don't know how reputable it is. But
I looked it up. There was a couple of them. It wasn't just this, but there was at least a few, and I think TMZ was one, maybe. So I have a couple photos. I can't necessarily say with 100% certainty that this is true, but it's not just being reported by one little place. This isn't like, Unilad or something like this.
Right.
Looks like it is on a few different places. So it's
Celebrity
possible.
Access, the blast. I'm just looking from a Google search.
There was a place called popculture.com. So
oh shit, what's another one? Daily Mail is actually reporting, I think, on this.
Well then,
it reports on their divorce.
We can we can talk about it as though it's true. If it turns out that it's not, then we'll issue a retraction on the next news show. Cyberzerk gives us 50 secs and says maybe he criticized her parking skills. Thinky face. That's funny. By the way, Cyberzerk, I think you sent me some secs on. No, maybe it wasn't you. Someone sent me something through my channel personally, and not, because I didn't do something, you got your money back. So let me know if you got some money back. I wasn't sending it back. It's just that because it's not U.S. currency, I guess I was supposed to approve of it, and I didn't in time. I didn't know. So anyway, so that's the thing about, I guess, when you do foreign currency, you have to through PayPal at least, you have to accept it. Anyhow, so
I've gone this whole time without making any bassist jokes. How good am I? But yeah, gentlemen, the worst kind of thought is the thought that settles. This is what bassists and other lesser musicians in bands have to observe. The kind of thoughts that you end up with are the kind of thoughts that settle. That means they want the rock and roll lifestyle, but one day is not going to be enough for them anymore. Guess what's going to happen? Now, the same thing can happen to singers and guitarists and drummers. But yeah, it's the settling thoughts that are the worst kind. All thoughts are bad, and most of them are thoughts, if you get me.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it gets me. I've just riffed off into nowhere now.
I see what you did there. You said riffed. Isn't Rage Against the Machine an SJW band anyway? Not that that's a bad thing.
A little bit, yeah. But before SJWs were a thing.
Yeah. Well, okay, maybe progressive. I don't know. Again, not saying that means he deserves it.
They blame everything on the American military-industrial complex and all that sort of shit.
Yeah. Okay. French Native 2
We didn't know any better in the 90s. We didn't know.
French Native 2 gives us $2 and says, Apple, our phones respect women. Ken says punks are often commies. But no, I don't know, because, Johnny Rotten is pretty outspoken. I think it's pretty divided in the music industry. There's definitely some
I always find it really ironic that Toxicity was the #1 album on September the 11th. And a load of hipsters sort of went around it going, yay, look, we love Muslims. See how much we love System of a Down?
Yeah.
Fucking Armenian. Definitely not Muslims. Like, oh, God.
That guy's got a beard, though. Okay, so any other thoughts on this last story? I mean, it's just kind of tragic, and it's hard to confirm for sure. If I learn something new, like a better source, I'll try to add it to the low bar so you guys can see if it turns out. Again, if it turns out it's not true, then I'll retract it. But right now, I don't see any reason to not believe it. I mean, I don't think
look
that
at the
Rage.
Blast About page. It's interesting. They take pride in scooping TMZ. That's kind of interesting. They're a competition site for TMZ.
Yeah.
And most of the time when I've gotten stuff from TMZ, it's turned out that they were the first site to report something that was true. I haven't seen them have to retract a whole lot of stuff. When they have had to retract stuff, it's usually been they've said it's been reported by friends and family that, or they've stated that it was a rumor that they were publishing, and then they've come back later and said, rumor debunked, and here's the information. But this site is at least as credible as TMZ.
Yeah, well, TMZ isn't that bad, honestly. So, I mean, they present it in a really shitty way, it's like it comes across as really trashy, and a lot of times they're very, very gossipy, but I don't think they lie. So I mean,
no, they're not
that often.
Falsehoods.
No, and I don't think they're necessarily trying to spin a lot. No. I mean, they definitely have a bias, but
they report the latest dish, basically.
Yeah.
And every so often the latest dish turns out to be inaccurate, and they tell you when it does. So if this site was launched by a co-founder of TMZ,
there you go.
and a producer of the TMZ syndicated TV show and a TMZ live syndicated series. So this is the same folks, but not the same site. If that tells you anything.
Right. No, I understand. So there you go. It's probably credible. I think TMZ often gets a lot of shit first. And I think that if these guys are competitors, they're doing that, which means that you do run a risk of reporting on things that are unconfirmed because you want to be first out the gate. But it does put them at the head of the curve. So maybe we'll see some news about this coming out in the coming days from Rolling Stone and mainstream things like MSNBC and stuff. Maybe, because it could be inconvenient to report on a story where a woman is abusive to a man and a man is victimized. So they may not report on it at all. They might just I don't think anybody needs to know about this, and just kind of move on. Even if it is about a musician, but it's also about a musician that's not, Rage isn't exactly huge right now, I actually remember, and I don't want to drag this out too much, but I actually remember for a time after... I want to say it was at least 10 years ago, so it was a while back, where Rage wanted to stop doing all of this, angsty young person music, because they weren't. They had kids, and they had families and shit. But the lead singer guy, I think it was, he wanted to keep doing the same kind of music, and the rest of the band was like, "Man, we don't want to do that anymore. We're too old for that, and we don't feel that way." And so it's just something I remember. Whenever I think of Rage, I think of that story where these guys are kind of over it, except for the main guy who's still we got to push back against the system, man. So.
The guitarist is still, I think he's still into that shit. Tom Morello. Half-caste fellow. He was, I think he's still involved in that kind of activism, maybe. Zach De La Rocca has kind of disappeared for the most part, but Tom Morello's still in the shadows, I think, still doing a slightly SJW thing, but that's fine. It's musicians.
Yeah, it's musicians.
They get caught up in that shit.
A lot of times that is exactly. It's pretty par for the course for artists to be that way. All right, so I'm gonna read a couple super chats and then I'm gonna get us out of here. So, well, it's only one super chat left. I Am Serious gives us $1 Canadian and doesn't say anything, although he does deliver a message right after that that says, Brian, check your Skype. I did. I can't respond to it right now, but basically he is basically telling me that the Google reverse image search is really bad, is all I'm going to say to that. So we're going to go ahead and close out the show. Thanks, guys, for coming on the HBR News Show. And I hope, again, Mike, I hope you feel better. Mike J, that is. But if you guys want, please give this video a like. I'd really appreciate that. It's good for us. It gets more people to check out the stuff. And I see 181 people watching, so I think we could use some more likes. So go ahead and do that. Also, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. If you're subscribed to the main channel or you watch us on other places like Twitch or Facebook, subscribe here too, Badger Live Streams. And if you're on Badger Live Streams, yeah, subscribe over on Twitch or on Facebook or something too, because, or I think you'd like the page on Facebook, I don't know. But do that because you never know when our platform will be taken from us and we'll have to like move to another one. So please do that. Leave us a comment, hit the bell for notifications, and maybe share the video too. Let other people know about this stuff. I want to hear what you guys' thoughts are, so I'll be looking out for your comments. Thanks again for coming on this episode of the HBR News Show. And we're going to go now into the after show where we're going to be talking about this website called Anime Feminists. It might be really bad. I don't really know. So, I mean, I apologize in advance if it is. I think it's going to be cancer, sure. But, yeah, that's where we're going to be going next. If you want to be a patron and be a part of the after show, go to patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And, yeah, be a part of the action. So, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Thanks again, guys, for joining us. And we'll talk to you guys very soon.